Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Loving obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva, who is everything there is. Janmadyasya yato anvayadi taratascha artheshu abhignaswarat tene brahma hridaya adi kavaye muhyanti yatsurayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna swena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent absolute being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to the first seer Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation, made of threefold gunas, appears in him as though real, like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusion Maya of the material world. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukadamritadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedas, flowing as immortal nectar from Shuka Brahma Rishi. Go on drinking this nectar day after day. So now we are entering second chapter of the third skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the first chapter of the third skandha, we saw the dialogue between Vidura and Uddhava begin. Vidura, after a grand pilgrimage, comes to the banks of Ganga and he meets Uddhava and asks a lot of questions about Krishna and all his associates and also the Pandavas. And now Uddhava begins his response. First, when he simply hears from Vidura all these questions about Krishna, his mind is completely overwhelmed because Krishna has just left the earthly abode, and only because of that Uddhava is roaming alone. Uddhava never leaves the side of Krishna until Krishna remains on earth. And the fact that Uddhava is now alone in Yamuna itself is a sign. And Uddhava was asked by Krishna to go towards Badrikashram, so that's why he is near Yamuna on the way. And here, since he meets Vidura and Vidura asks all these questions about Krishna, who has left the earthly abode, and therefore Uddhava is already very dearly missing the association of Krishna, which he has been blessed to have all these years. And now, with all these questions asked about Krishna, Uddhava's mind is completely overwhelmed. He is unable to even say a word in reply because Uddhava is such a devotee, such a deeply beloved associate of Krishna. In fact, right from his childhood, Shuka says that even when he was simply 5 years old, he had no inclination to eat or to play with anything else except to simply engage with Krishna in childish play through his own toys and so on. Uddhava was not in Vrindavan when Krishna was growing up in Vrindavan, and he was in Mathura, but Uddhava was always aware of Krishna and he was waiting for Krishna to come and so that he could get his association in Mathura. And until then, Uddhava was always missing Krishna even as a child and playing with various toys and dolls and remembering Krishna. Such was his intense love, and he was an eternal associate. That's why he didn't have to do any penance or any practice. Right from childhood, he was naturally drawn to Krishna even before he met Krishna. And now, having grown grey through time, with all these years being with Krishna and serving him, and never tiring of the service, this is a service that has no end of any kind. He never tires. It only energizes Uddhava to serve Krishna every day and be with him all through. And now that Krishna has left the earthly abode, even though he has served him all through, now he is, because of this long association, and because of having grown gray and becoming old now, Uddhava, still he dearly misses that association every moment after Krishna has left the earthly abode. And his thought is always fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna. And therefore, he is completely immersed in this overflowing memories and emotions of his all his time with Krishna on earth. And he is not able to say a word. He simply remains quiet. And a long time goes by, something like half an hour or so goes by. They are simply in silence. Uddhava remains quiet, and his hair is standing erect, and tears are flowing from his eyes. And Vidura comes to know just by this, without Uddhava having spoken a word, Vidura comes to know that Uddhava has realized everything that there is to realize because of the symptoms that Uddhava is exhibiting here, all the tears coming out and complete silence and a sacred stillness and hair standing erect and just filled with love. And then finally, Uddhava slowly returned to the normal consciousness and replied to Vidura in a very sweet tone. And he said, "O Vidura, alas, the sun in the shape of Sri Krishna has set." So it's a beautiful expression because the sun sets, it doesn't mean that the sun is gone anywhere. It's just that we cannot see the sun. The sun is seen somewhere else. Similarly, Uddhava says the sun in the shape of Sri Krishna has set, and therefore we are in darkness and we are caught in this by this python of time. And so, what can I say when you ask about our welfare? And then he says, unfortunately, even though Sri Hari lived with the Yadus, many could not recognize him living close to him. His own Yadavas, who were so intelligent and who lived with him, who sported with him, so many of them did not account him as the supreme being. They just simply took him as an associate. And now that he has left the earthly abode, everyone dearly misses him. Uddhava says, however, the one whose intellect is completely surrendered, whose heart is completely surrendered, he was never misguided. So Uddhava was one of them. So the important point here is even when Krishna was in his earthly lila, sporting pastimes, there were many who were either ignoring this great being right here on earth in a human body, and some who were openly even disrespectful. But Uddhava says those who surrendered their heart to him, for them, nothing misguided them, whether it was the disrespectful words of some Yadavas or even outright animosity by people like Sishupala. None of them, because they know that all of these are simply the same deluding potency, Maya, of the Lord, and therefore they were not misguided or deluded by anything, and they simply cherished every moment of their association. But now all of us have been left in the dark because Krishna has left the earthly abode. He says, having shown his divine form to men who had practiced no penance, so he was freely available for everyone. The darshan, the sight of Krishna was freely available for everyone at the time, those who did penance, those who did no penance, everyone. And yet only a few realized what they were seeing. But now he has removed that vision from our view, and therefore our very sight has been taken away, as it were. He says this form he assumed in order to reveal the power of his own yoga maya. So, as we said before, when Krishna appears or when the Lord appears on earth, it is not under the effect of the regular maya which causes people to be caught in the ideas of I and mine, but Krishna himself is only coming with Yoga Maya. And Yoga Maya is the special aspect of the divine energy that makes everything conducive. And those who are surrendered unto Krishna, like Uddhava, are also only within Yogamaya. Whereas those who do not recognize him, they are caught still in this deluding Maya or Mahamaya. But here Uddhava saying that he had assumed this wonderful form through his own Yoga Maya that is capable of manifesting such beauty, and it was so suited for all the pastimes he did. So every form that Krishna took as a child, as a young man, and then as an adult, every form was so sweet to behold. It was so beauty personified, and it was an object of wonder for everyone, perfect in the personification of grace itself. And therefore, Uddhava says, looking at that form, he remembers many incidents now, just as Arjuna. If you remember in the first Skandha, after Krishna has left the earthly abode, Arjuna comes back to Yudhishthira and pours his heart out, remembering every single event. Similarly, Uddhava, who's the other dear friend of Krishna, who, unlike Arjuna, even never left his side. Arjuna had royal duties and therefore he could not be with Krishna all the time, though he was, of course, a very dear friend of Krishna. But Uddhava was so fortunate to be literally along with Krishna all through his earthly stay. And so Uddhava now recounts that during the Rajasuya sacrifice of Yudhishthira, when Yudhishthira performed a great sacrifice, yajna, everyone saw Krishna there and they were just simply bewildered by the beauty of Krishna. They were all looking at him and seeing that this is the perfect workmanship of creation. That is how charming Krishna looked. That's why Krishna is called Shyama Sundara. He is called as the very embodiment of beauty itself. His beauty has inspired so much poetry, so much art, so much music, dance, sculptures through millennia, because it is the kind of beauty that is directly the divine grace taking a humanly form. And therefore, it is a beauty that transcends all human beauty and of a completely different order. And so Uddhava says this beauty was so captivating. He also remembers how, with this beauty and all his smiles and his jokes and his glances, when he was in Braja, in Vrindavan, the women would simply leave their household work half finished and run towards him. So, this is the great surrendered, loving devotion of the gopis of Vrindavan. They were enchanted by Krishna. They were just completely so devoted to this most divine being of Krishna that they did not care for any other responsibility. Whatever they had, it is said that when Krishna would play his enchanting flute music in the forests of Vrindavan, the women would leave things as they are. They would drop their children, they would drop whatever household work they were doing. They did not care for anything. And they simply ran to Krishna out of overpowering love. So, this is the greatness of the complete one pointed devotion that Krishna could effortlessly bring forth in these women. And then Uddhava says, with a mind full of compassion, Krishna saw his own gentle form. So, this is why it's always something that Bhagavatam says again and again, that everything is ultimately expressions of the very same Krishna. So, he saw his own gentle forms in the form of Vasudeva and others, that is his father and his mother. They were all expressions of the same Vasudeva who were very gentle. And he saw the wild or the evil forms, which like Kamsa, which were also eventually his own forms, essentially, because as we said, everything is his Maya, everything is his lila. So he saw his own gentle forms being persecuted by his own wild forms. And seeing this, though he is ever unborn, he appeared as it were, born as it were, with his glorious manifestation as well as his expansion, which is his brother Balaram. Just like fire, which is a beautiful simile, it's given fire is latent everywhere, that is, in every piece of wood there is fire. But when fire appears, when the fire is seen, it has a great effulgence to it that is hidden in other logs of wood. So similarly, the all the beings are the essence of Krishna, and they are latent within them, but it is not realized, and they are covered by their own illusion. Whereas, just as fire, when it is simply burning without any covering of any kind, how it glows brightly. Similarly, Krishna and Balaram glowed brightly, the essence, by being born, as it were, in this manifest creation, which is his own play. And then he says, it is such a mystery that he who is unborn would assume the appearance of as if born to Vasudeva, as if dwelling in Vrindavan, as if being afraid of Kamsa and therefore not coming to Mathura for long years, as if then fleeing the city of Mathura later when there is a demon called Kalayavana who chases them. So there are so many wonderful pastimes of Krishna that will all come later in detail. As we see in Bhagavatam, in every skandha, someone or the other remembers and goes over them. In the first skandha, it was Arjuna who went through these. In the second skandha, Brahma himself, when he detailed all the avatars, he especially went into Krishna avatar and detailed all the pastimes at a high level. And now Uddhava similarly in this third skandha is saying the same things with his own mood. Each one has a different mood of love. And Uddhava says, all of these are so mysterious. How beautifully he stayed in Vrindavan, then he came to Mathura, and then he fled Mathura, went to Dwaraka. All of these are so mysterious. He says, when I remember, when he came back to Mathura after he freed his mother and father, Devaki and Vasudeva, he went and bowed at their feet and said, dear father and mother, we, that is Balaram and myself, were not able to render any service to you for all these years because we were in Vrindavan and we couldn't come to Mathura. And so we owe a debt to you. Please forgive us. So this is so unbelievable for Uddhava to even remember the Lord of the universe who can do anything, but who took on this role of a boy growing up in Vrindavan, then comes to Mathura after 11 years, and then releases his own parents, and then falls at their feet and asks for their forgiveness. And it's all a mystery because he is the one who spawns this whole universe, and within this he appears, and as it were, asking for forgiveness, following the right dharma and setting the right example. All of this is done by Krishna simply to set the right example. It is said by him in Bhagavad Gita too that I have no duty to do, and yet I keep on doing things, working, because if I don't do it, people will follow the wrong example then. So I have to set the right example. And that's what Krishna does throughout his earthly pastime. He does things so perfectly, even though he has no duty to do. Here, he discharges the duty of a son so perfectly, and he touches their feet, his parents' feet, and bows to them, asks for their forgiveness. All this to show how one should respect one's parents because we come from them. And so Uddhava remembers it and he is filled with tears. He says, having once even been with Krishna, having even been in contact with the dust that has come from his lotus feet, how can anyone forget it? Remembering that he is the same Lord who sported in all these pastimes and who removed the earth's burden simply like a mere play, because the entire Mahabharat war, which resulted in millions of people dying and the entire burden of earth going down, is all orchestrated by Krishna like a simple sport while remaining completely unaffected by it, untouched by it. Then he says, you also know, Vidura, that Shishupala, so these stories will come later, but he's giving an indication that Shishupala, who was a very evil king and who hated Krishna from birth, who had such envy towards him, and who once in a court cursed him so badly that finally Krishna takes his life. But by doing so, Krishna makes Shishupala merge in him. Everybody sees it in the court that when Krishna kills Shishupala, a light from Shishupala comes forth and enters Krishna's being, which is to show that Shishupala's spirit merged in Krishna. So Uddhava says, Shishupala, who hated Krishna all through, attained oneness with Krishna, which even yogis who do penance for a long time find it difficult to attain. So, how compassionate he is that the one who hated him so much was granted the highest liberation. How can then one bear separation from him? Uddhava asks. Then he says, similarly, all the heroes who were killed in the action in the battlefield of Mahabharat, every one of them who were killed, and this was already seen in the first Skandha too, and again this is said here by Uddhava, that everyone killed in Mahabharat war by the hands of Arjuna, for instance, they were all dying in the presence of Krishna because Krishna was the charioteer, Arjuna was discharging these missiles, and they were all getting killed by the arrows of Arjuna. But while dying, they were drinking with their eyes the lotus like face of Krishna as they died. So they had the vision of Krishna as they were dying, all the people who were in the battlefield. And every one of them, therefore, attained the supreme abode. So, this is the grace of being in the presence of a supreme being, the most benevolent grace of simply being liberated by thinking of him in whichever way or by seeing him in whichever way at the moment of death. And therefore, he's saying that, Uddhava is saying that being the Lord of all the three worlds, being unequaled by anyone, he is adored. Even the place he stood, the very footstool on which he stood, is all adored by everyone. And yet he was so proper in offering respect to seniors, to elders, and he behaved literally like a servant to people who are elder to him and took their feet, washed their feet, all these things that Krishna did. He would, anytime a great sage would come, he would personally go and wash their feet. This is to envision this supreme being, and all the sages know who he is, and they yet are respected so highly by Krishna, and they smile and they accept this because they know who Krishna is. And Krishna very sweetly puts their feet and in a bowl and pours water and washes their feet. And this happens multiple times as recorded in Mahabharata. This is the respect Krishna showed to sages, to elders, and set this tradition of taking care of the elders, giving them the right respect, and so on. And not only that, he, of course, extended his grace to even his enemies, as we saw. Another example is Putana. This example came earlier too. Brahma also mentioned it. A demoness who came dressed like a beautiful woman when Krishna was a small baby, and her intent was to kill Krishna. So she mixed poison with milk, and she wanted to feed that milk to Krishna by taking him on on her lap. And when she did that, Krishna sucked her, and knowing full well what her intent was, he, of course, was not even touched by that poison. Instead, he just sucked the life out of her. She realized as soon as he took the mouth that she was being sucked completely out of her breath. She couldn't breathe. She was totally panting, and then her beautiful form that she had assumed out of her own siddhis all went away, and her ugly form came out, and she finally collapsed and died. And yet, when she died, she was also merged in him. Her spirit was merged in Krishna, and thereby Krishna gave her the liberation too. So that's why Uddhava is asking, is there anyone so merciful that we can resort for protection other than Krishna? Everyone, every demon, every evil king who came to Krishna intent to kill him or intent to do harm to him, I consider all of them as his devotees, Uddhava says, because they had fixed their mind on the Lord, and they came to Krishna at the moment of their death, and they saw instead the Supreme Being seated on the Garuda, on his vehicle, the eagle, and with his Sudarshana Chakra, the wheel, kill them at the moment of death and thereby grant them liberation. So, how can they be anything other than devotees, all these evil kings and demons who were granted liberation by Krishna? And then he says, now he starts recounting from the beginning all the various events in Krishna's life. He says, in order to bring relief to this earth, the Lord was born of Vasudeva and Devaki in the prison house of Kamsa. So that's how it begins. When Kamsa arrests Devaki and Vasudeva and puts them in the prison house is born Krishna in response to the prayer of Brahma. And then from there, he is removed. Uddhava says he was removed to Nanda's Vraja, and this was done by his father. His father Vasudeva was instructed to take the baby to Nanda's Vraja, and there he lived with Balaram, the elder brother, for 11 years, concealing his glory. And in those 11 years, he exhibited the most wonderful pastimes, the sweetest lilas of Krishna are in those 11 years in Vrindavan. On the banks of Yamuna, where there are trees and birds and all the beautiful forests, the Lord sported in the midst of all the cowherd boys and girls and the calves and cows. And he was when he was a child, he would exactly act like a little child of the cutest child that there can be, sometimes weeping, sometimes laughing, sometimes looking at people, sometimes doing mischievous things, and all the rest. And then, as he grew a little older, he started grazing white bulls and cows, taking them to grazing, and he would play the flute while he is taking all these bulls and cows with all the other cowherd boys. And all the cows were so enchanted by his music, they would give so much milk. And then, while doing so, Kamsa was already dispatching demons, starting from Putana as a baby, as we saw. So many demons were sent by Kamsa to kill Krishna in Vrindavan, and every one of them was dispatched, killed like a sport, just simply smashing them like children would smash playthings. And then he tamed Kalia, the famous incident where the river Yamuna was poisoned by a snake. And when the river was poisoned and drinking the water, cows and cowherd boys had also fell unconscious. Krishna goes there and first revives all of them by just looking at them. And then he goes into the water and fights this Kalia snake and banishes the snake out of the river, and then purifies the river again so that everybody can bathe and drink the river water. So, this beautiful pastime of banishing Kalia and restoring Yamuna's purity is something Uddhava again recounts. And then he says the other most remembered pastime of Krishna is Govardhan hill, which he lifts. So once, when Nanda, Krishna's father, was going to do a great sacrifice for Indra, Krishna stopped him and said, there is no need to pray to Indra, because everything happens only through our own hard work and through what nature provides, and ultimately through what the Supreme Being ordains. And therefore, there is no reason to do any worship for partial demigods or devatas. So he stops this uh, sacrifice for Indra, and Indra gets very angry, and therefore he sends torrential rain to Vrindavan. And Krishna, like a sport, lifts this Govardhan hill and holds it on his finger, and by that he gives shelter to all of Vrindavan, and everybody takes shelter under Govardhan mountain, and then Indra recognizes his folly and comes praying to Krishna. So this Govardhan Leela is remembered by Uddhava. And finally, and most beautifully, Uddhava remembers the most special Leela of Krishna, which also Brahma recounted, which was on the autumn night, full moon nights, Krishna would play the flute in the forests of Vrindavan, and this would bring all the cowherd women of Vrindavan into the forest, and Krishna would dance with those women, and this is called the Rasa Leela, the most famous, beautiful dance of devotion and total surrender with Krishna by all these gopis, all these cowherd women. And this particular pastime, which will be detailed by Shuka Brahma Rishi much later in 10th Skandha, is given as a glimpse multiple times. And this is the most loving pastime of Krishna with the gopis dancing on a full moon night in the autumn. And it's especially so because autumn full moon nights are so clear. During the monsoon, the full moons are still covered with clouds and so on. And after the monsoon is over, the rains have stopped. And when the autumn comes, the weather is so clear, it is also perfect in terms of neither being too cold or not too hot. And the sky is so clear and the full moon is shining so bright. And in that full moon night, in the forests of Vrindavan, Krishna plays the most enchanting music that cannot be resisted by anyone. And all the cowherd women, as we saw earlier, they drop everything, all their duties, whatever they are caught in, whatever binds them to family life and to various material responsibilities. They drop everything, totally surrendered to Krishna, and come to Him, and He bestows them with the supreme grace that is rarest for anyone to accomplish. So, this Rasa Leela, Uddhava remembers with great love and tells Vidura, such is our Lord, who did all of these great things on earth like sport, and now He has left us and gone. And with this chapter ends, and Uddhava will continue to narrate more of the Lord's exploits to Vidura. But for now, Uddhava stops with this because Rasa Leela is such a special Leela, such a special pastime of Krishna, that when he comes to this, he stops and he remembers the unparalleled sweetness of this episode and how blessed all those gopis were, and how this is, of course, remembered till today and enacted and remembered and glorified for thousands of years. So, this special pastime was remembered by Uddhava and he pauses. And with this, we end this chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.